Welcome to selfdiscoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of An Author's Kiss right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I am your host, Sarah Troy, and I have a lovely guest called Sara Winokur, and we're going to be talking about her book, Ivory Bones, the Lewis Chessmen Murders. Sounds quite intriguing, doesn't it? She's the acclaimed geneticist-turned-author Sara Winokur returns to her highly anticipated novel Ivory Bones, the Lewis Chessmen Murders. The mystery thriller transports its readers into a world where the DNA science unravels ancient secrets and the hunt for missing treasure turns deadly. Set against the landscape of Iceland, Africa, and the Americas, Ivory Bones follows this forensic scientist, Brenja, is that?
Brenja, that's correct.
Okay, and the surname there, Palos.
It's Pal's daughter,
okay,
but it's Icelandic, so don't
exactly.
Don't worry about the pronunciation.
Can't do the accent. Well, as she races to recover the iconic Lewis Chessmen and the most celebrated medieval artifacts, but before time runs out, the centuries-old diary holds the clues, revealing brutal tale of survival, secrets buried for generations. Brenja's investigation not only uncovers the chess pieces, shocking past, but also forces her to confront the truth about her own generic history and heritage. So you are a geneticist, a researcher, an author who cultivates thrillers combined with DNA science and gripping historical fiction, and with a PhD in molecular genetics, groundbreaking research has contributed to identifying mutations responsible for diseases such as muscular dystrophy and Huntington's disease. Wow, there is a story right there, never mind the book. So welcome to the show, Sara.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
I once interviewed somebody who was, what do they call it when they forensic, they, oh gosh, what would you call it?
Criminology?
Yes, yeah, I can. Yeah. But and through her forensic, she turned author, and took all that she had learned from that, and then applied it to the books, which were wonderful. Has this been kind of the same case for you, taking the things that you have unraveled and thought, "Oh, these would be juicy in a novel"?
Absolutely. So just to backtrack a bit, I did work at the University of California for 25 years doing genetics research, purely research in the laboratory. And we identified mutations that involved in many different genetic diseases. So I myself had a health scare at one point and decided to take a step back. During that time, I got healthy. This was a good 15 years ago. And I sort of had to reflect on what I wanted to do for the remainder of my life. I would either go back to genetics research or do something different, take on a new challenge. And I decided that it would just be a lot of fun to write a fiction novel because I had written so many scientific articles that I thought, why don't I just try to incorporate a little bit of genetics, not in a dull and boring way, but a little bit of genetics into the mystery itself. So that's kind of how it started.
I love that because it's taking what you know so well and then weaving it into storytelling. But at the same time, while people are reading the thriller and going on the adventure, there is kind of some factual stuff that they're learning along the way as well. And we know that people actually do learn better through storytelling than they do from a manual, right? So it's kind of taking what you know, inserting it in there, and I think people are left with, is that possible? Oh, what about this? What about that? And I think that's
absolutely right.
Yeah,
I did just read an article that sort of looked at whether reading nonfiction versus fiction would help ward off Alzheimer's
Hmm.
disease. And I apparently reading fiction has to engage your mind
Yes.
more. So I was glad to learn that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the obviously the researcher is in you. You can't turn that off. But
That's
now
right.
you've researched, I mean, why this story? What was it about this story? And what did you actually have to research in order to bring this story together?
Right. So I have always loved a puzzle and
Mm,
solving, I don't want to say problems, but
mm.
solving issues. And so
Yes.
that's really why I went into science to begin with. And so when I decided to sort of reinvent myself, I thought, why don't I write a mystery novel, a historical mystery, which also solves a puzzle?
Hmm.
Iceland. Why Iceland?
Hmm.
Because Iceland has it has a national DNA database it's not a criminal database. It's a database of the majority of its citizens. And there is a company, since taken over by an American company,
Yeah.
that is utilizing that data to tease out what mutations might make one more susceptible to even common diseases like heart disease and diabetes and cancer and so forth. So when I decided to write a fiction book,
Hmm.
I was I knew of several people that worked in this company because I had been involved in genetics, and they invited me to come take a tour and stay for a few days in Iceland. And I did travel around the country at that point, and I just thought, "Ooh, this place is really, really ripe for a
A
mystery."
mystery.
Yeah, because
It
two
set the
thirds,
stage for you.
yeah, all these like rural homesteads that are probably like kilometers away from the next rural
Mm,
homestead, and I just thought, between the landscape and I mean, the landscapes are so eerily beautiful
mm.
and, very remote settings. And so I thought, hmm, this is where
Mm.
I'm going to set the novel.
Right. So, I mean, if what people don't understand about writing is that yes, you have an idea, but you need the ingredients to put it together. So,
Yeah.
where is the setting? And that's a story in itself. What is it around? And kind of like the DNA aspect of it, obviously is very prevalent. Who would be the people that, how do you merge the two together and along with everything else? And it is like putting pieces of puzzles together. But then at some point, which I've heard from many authors, my brother is one, the characters take over and they start writing themselves. Did that happen to you?
Yes, absolutely. I just felt like like I have this cast of characters that are really my friends for the most part
Yes,
in
yes,
my
yes.
head. And so I sort of I don't want to sound crazy, but you do sort of speak to them and
Of
ask them,
course, of
where
course.
they're going next.
Yeah.
So I've become very fond of them. So many. This current book is the second in a series. So the first book was also set in Iceland. Um, the books can be read independently, but they have many of the same characters.
Right. So the next adventure, so to speak.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Again, a thing with authors, again, my brother, generally there's a trilogy there because the characters are speaking to you and saying, well, this adventure's over, but I'm not.
Right. And that's so true. I mean, it's really all about character and
Mm,
their journey and
mm.
their arc. Um, so we're not quite there yet. We're on to book three, I think.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
And as a reader, when somebody reads a book and it's taken them on a journey, a roller coaster, and they've got invested in the characters, they're seeing wherever they are, whatever they're, participating in, you're living it vicariously, through the page there, through their eyes. When you put the book down, but I want another one. What's their next
Yeah.
adventure? And that's what people love is, the next adventure because they've become invested in the characters.
It's almost hard to like when you get to the end of the book, you're sort of like, I want more.
Yes. Yeah, they're my friends.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Come back.
What's next?
Um, do you did you find it easier going into this second book with these characters? You know, than the first book you were in discovery of them, and now you know who they are and you know where to take them better?
Yes, absolutely. I not only in terms of the characters, um, but I approached the writing itself differently. With the first book, I just had a jumble of good
Mm.
ideas. Well, what I thought were good ideas. And I
Own it,
just
darling, own
began
it.
I just began to write.
Yes.
And then I found, since it's a very intricate, like historical mystery, that all the pieces obviously do have to fit together.
Yes.
And I would get to, page 89 and realize, wait a minute, this has to happen on, in chapter 1 or 2.
Right.
And so for this book, I approached it differently. I did make an outline. I am sort of an analytical person to
Mm.
begin with.
Right.
It wasn't an extensive outline, but it really helped me keep on track and keep it tight, to keep the mystery tight, and all the red herrings in the right place and so forth.
Again, it's like cooking a dish and making sure that all the ingredients around you and you'll know when to apply them, you know, when to add
That's
them.
right.
And that if the ingredients aren't there, you could skip over it and go, oh God, I forgot to put the yeast in, or I forgot to put the sugar in, or
That's
whatever.
a very good analogy. Yes.
So, you know, it is a good idea to have that. And then obviously more things will materialize the further you go down the road. But these are the
Yeah,
fundamentals that need to be in the recipe.
that's right. That's right. Absolutely.
And you know, that kind of thing gives it substance and gives it depth, because you know there's nothing worse than a reader reading something, but hang on, there's something, you know, missing here or not connecting. Where did that come from?
Right.
And it can throw them off, you know, and then maybe even lose interest. So that thread of keeping the rhythm going is really
Yes.
important.
Yes. And to your point, I find one of the most disappointing things when I read a mystery novel and get to the end, and then it's a complete surprise how that person could have been the culprit all along.
Right.
There, you have, I think one has to have little hints, little
Yes.
clues throughout the book, so that when the reader gets to the end, they're like, oh,
Yeah,
oh
that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
now it makes sense that
Yeah.
he or she did
Yeah.
this or that or
You
that.
want it to be a surprise, but
Oh, for
you want to know
sure.
those are the breadcrumbs you missed along the way. All along,
That's
it was
right, right,
telling
right.
you, and you didn't
But
see
it,
it. You know?
yeah,
Yeah,
but it's almost like you've been cheated if you
yeah,
haven't had any nibbles of those
right.
breadcrumbs.
And you know, you know, again, I have to keep referring to my brother as an author. Whenever he writes, he brings up the characters, and then at the end, you find out what it's actually about, and it's never about what you thought it was about. But when you get to be what it's about, now you actually get. But if that was introduced earlier, it would have been too bizarre. But as it
Right.
was introduced at the end, and that's the thing, we're taking people on a journey, and
Yes.
it's almost like a treasure hunt in itself. Are you paying attention to the clues? Right? And
Yes.
so that's the
Absolutely.
engagement of as a reader. Are you paying attention to the clues along the way?
Yeah. This particular book, I'll show you the cover of it. It's Ivory Bones, the Lewis Chessmen Murders. It
Beautiful cover.
is set in Iceland initially. The present day forensic geneticist, Brinja, receives a 400-year-old diary that was
Mm.
found along with some skeletal remains. And these were found in New York. And the diary is written in Icelandic. So that her colleague at NYPD sends her this diary, sends Brinja the diary and says, hey, can you help me translate this? Nobody here knows Icelandic, of course. So in reading that diary, she realizes that there are clues as to the many people have not heard of these chessmen, but this is a very famous chess set. These Lewis Chessmen, and you can see that They have very animated features. They
Hmm.
were carved in the 12th century. It's a question whether they were carved in Iceland or Norway, but nearly the entire set has been found. They're in the British Museum. They're
Mm.
worth like $1 or $2 million each.
Right.
And
Yeah, wow.
there's still three that are missing.
Oh.
So there are clues in this diary as to where they might be. And so everybody wants to get their hands on that diary, and they don't all have the most respectable motives.
Not
Yeah,
everybody is ethical about it.
no. So it
Show
sort
me
of
the
ties
money.
in, it sort of ties in this the diary was actually written by a captive of a pirate raid on Iceland in
Mm.
1627, and she was taken down to North Africa to the Barbary coast to be sold as a slave. So it
Wow.
follows her whole story too,
Yeah.
which is historical fact. So
Mm.
there's a lot of
Oh.
historical fact in here between the chessmen and this raid on Iceland and
And DNA.
DNA, yes, of course. We don't want to forget that. Yeah.
So it's a faction book, so fact and fiction put together, which, again,
Oh.
I love faction books because I love, it's like Clive Cussler always did, something in the beginning of his chapters that happened ages ago. And then you get to modern day and they're on an adventure and the thread always comes into it. And like many of the
Mm-hmm.
things that he's presented have actually been based in fact or kind of a precursor to something that is happening. And
Ah,
and I think that's the excitement of when you find something, oh God, this is true. This is actually
yes.
happening. And then it makes, I think, people more engaged because this isn't just fantasy anymore or fiction anymore. This
Right.
is kind of like, I want to know more, right?
Right. I do always love to learn something as I'm
Mm,
reading, even in fiction, of course.
yes. Yeah, but you can have the fiction, sci-fi and everything else, but I think it's kind of sci-fi as you look at things and look at technology today. How long is it going to be before we talk to our computers and they talk back? It's already happening. I did an interview with ChatGPT, right, which was
Mm-hmm.
quite mind-blowing. So it's like Star Trek always talked to the computers and of it. We're not far from that. So I think an awful lot of the time sci-fi is the preparation of what's to come in many ways.
Yes.
But when you look historically back on something, and you weave it into the thread of now and you see how relevant it is to now, that I think
Mm-hmm.
it changes the perception of history itself.
Yes, absolutely. And there's so many parallels, of
Mm,
course,
mm.
between the past and present, and what do we learn from the past? Hopefully we do.
Well,
Although unfortunately,
at the present moment,
it's
I don't think
not
anything's being
always the
learned.
case. Not always the
No,
case.
no, definitely not.
But best to at least be aware of it.
exactly. And, there's, you can have it. This is the thing about book clubs, right? You can have a dozen people reading the book and they're all going to get something different out of it. And this is why I
Mhm.
encourage people to have podcast clubs, listen to a podcast, take notes, and then share those notes afterwards, because then everybody's got a different perspective. And we learn from that. It opens our
Mhm.
minds. Oh, you got that. I didn't think about that. And
Absolutely.
that just rounds the picture out a lot more. And I think if we could have you know, taking a book like this, where how much of this is fact? Did you know this was actually true? And this actually really did happen. And then it makes people want to know more.
Hmm.
And I think we need to keep our minds engaged and proactive. Otherwise, we what we don't use, we lose, right? So,
That's right.
and reading a good novel that has some historic facts in there that then makes you want to know more, maybe, even Google it, but like intrigued, what
Or
else?
ChatGPT.
Oh,
Right.
ChatGPT,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That I think it's already been proven if you don't use the brain, you're going to lose the brain. And I think
Right.
reading is something that allows us to stay engaged in our own lives. It keeps us
Uh,
inquisitive.
Right. And I think that the same goes for writing as
Mm,
well,
hmm
because as I found as I was writing that I have always loved doing research,
hmm
but I did want to really, uh, you know, drill down into the history of these Lewis
Yes.
Chessmen and where they originated from. And why they, have these sort of bizarre expressions and so forth, and where they came from and where they were lost.
Hmm.
And
And
then
then
the whole, sorry,
the
the,
journey of the young lady,
yeah,
being the slave and everything else. It's like they could all be separate stories on their own, but when you blend them together, it just
yes.
flavorizes it more.
And I did intersperse the novel with the diary entries
Hmm.
of this woman that was taken captive as a slave, but it's written in the first person point of view. So
Mm.
it's more like immediate as she's seeing things,
Yes,
as things are happening to her, so that the reader can engage more with her circumstance at the
you're right.
moment. Yeah.
And it's like
So,
what she got to do, a slave, with the chessmen things, and where does this DNA thing come in? And if you looked at again the ingredients on the table and go, but how are you gonna put these together? I just can't see how the flavors will work. And then as you weave in the story, and then yeah,
yeah, exactly. And
and
it's
that's what you
fun.
want from a book. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You want something you can't get your nose out of, right?
That's right.
Which I think is
Exactly.
always very important. And a lot of people like yourself who've been in careers that were very detailed, and then they turn around to be authors. I always say bring us a certain excitement that, sometimes that an orphan author may not, because sometimes
Hmm.
they may not do the research, but you're coming at it from already different forms of intrigue, uh,
Hmm.
knowing how to research. That's a big thing. Not everybody knows actually how to do the research. Where do I go? What do I do? Where do I follow up? Where is it taking me? And I think that is quite lacking in some places where they've got a
Mm.
story, the story comes out, but where's the research to give it depth?
Yes, absolutely. And on the, flip side of that, one has to, I mean, in my case, I do love doing the research, and
Hmm.
I gather my research through all sorts of sources, but one has to be careful to keep the book flowing
Yes.
at a pace,
Yeah, don't
and
go down the
not to
research hole.
put
Yeah.
shove in every
Yeah.
interesting tidbit that I found out
Yeah.
along the way. So
Yes,
it's
so
it's
not
a
too
bit of
much
a
salt
balance.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Very good analogy. Right.
And yeah, I mean, that's the balance, isn't it? Because what do we want in a book? We want the intrigue. We want it to take us on an adventure, but it's got to have a flow. It's got to have a rhythm to
Yes.
it. You know, it can't be high all the time, otherwise that could be exhausting. It can't be
Hmm.
low, it can be boring. But you do
Hmm.
need, the leading up and the down and the rhythm of it for people to stay engaged. And, the
Hmm.
reason I call this genre the author's kiss is that, after you put that book down, it does feel like an embrace, right?
Yes.
And that's what you
Yeah.
want a book. You want somebody to refer a book. You want somebody to speak about a book, because that's the embrace, that's the kiss that the author is giving you. And that, I think, is when you know you've read a good book.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. And you're left wanting more, as you
Yes,
said. Yeah.
yes. And so, okay, you're going on to number three now with the same characters. Um,
Yeah.
have you thought, oh, this could be a 4, 5, or 6, or is a 3 a conclusion, or are you just
I
letting it happen as it happens?
I do also want to write a different type of book, but I first want to complete what I envision this as
Mm,
a trilogy.
hmm.
So this third book will actually be set in Greenland, which is a very hot topic these days, as
Yeah.
you know. So it's also
Better
there are a
better write it
lot
quick
of
while it's still Greenland.
I know. I better get going. Yeah, that's true. I yeah. I can't imagine that really will
No,
happen. But
same here in Canada.
okay, yeah.
Ain't happening, babe.
Yeah. No, please. I would, yeah, anyway, we won't get into that. Um, so, there are a lot of competing interests there between, the Chinese that are
Mm,
wanting to mine for all these rare earth
yes,
elements,
yeah.
the climate change factor, the competition for, military security, and the Arctic shipping lanes. And so there's a lot. And then the sort of conflict between the native Inuit Greenlanders and all of these external forces. You know, there are only 50,000 Greenlanders.
Right. Yeah.
So
and like being under the radar
putting it
for
all
so
together.
long. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like suddenly, you know, you've become a global interest and everybody wants your land. And it's like, hang on, mate, you know.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we just go back to being under the radar, please? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's, you know, as with everything, having a certain amount of attention is okay. Too much attention, it generally brings the wrong eyes.
That's right. And I'm afraid that's happening there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What would you say is the agenda through the book?
For which book?
For this one, the Ivory one.
The agenda, meaning?
Meaning, like, there's always, you know, a certain conclusion that you're wanting to come out, one that you want to leave somebody with.
Well, in referring to, I don't want to give too much away, but the character arc of the main protagonist has throughout the book come to realize that she needs to let go and not put a wall around herself. I think that's, rather than being, you know, frightened or traumatized. Well, she was traumatized by her past, but she's got to go on living.
Right.
So I think it's sort of a theme that reverberates not only with her, but with this captive in the 1600s, living under horrendous circumstances. There's this parallel between, you know, how the slave is approaching life and trying to make the best of it and doing what she can, versus Brynja, who's walled herself off initially.
Right. So in a lot of ways, her own self-discovery.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. And I think, you know, she's learned a lot through the book by almost immersing herself in the life of this captive so long ago and drawing parallels to her.
But that's what a good book does. I mean, here you've got it is the diary that affects her, parallels her life, and makes her look at her life in a different way.
Yes.
And you know that you always say inspiration begets invitation. And she's inspired by this woman's journey and her resilience and obviously tenacity.
Yes.
And so it becomes an invitation for her to find her own resilience, her own tenacity, and how to break that wall down. And I think that's what we all look for in life. You know, we don't realize sometimes we're building a wall up around us. We don't realize, we call it defense, or we just, you know, seclusion. I'm just, you know, taking time out. But you've got to be careful that you don't put too many bricks there, because next thing you know, you're how do you get out of this now?
Right. So I think one of the best quotes I've ever heard is one from Evelyn Roosevelt, where she says, "Do something every day that scares you a little."
Yeah. Yes.
You know, and I think it applies to so much in life, because I think once you do take that step, you'll realize it's really not so scary. And that would be my advice to anyone in, you know, wanting to or hoping to embark on writing a novel. It can be rather intimidating.
Yes.
If one has never done this. But just take those steps. And I don't mean by scare you like jumping out of a airplane at 20,000 feet,
right?
But just like
without the parachute,
just take or bungee jumping, but just take that step. And it's a little scary, but that's good. It'll make you grow.
Yeah, I've got this view on common sense fear. You know, don't put your hand in the fire. Don't walk in front of a bus. Don't go and do things that you know are going to harm you. But don't look at the unknown fearfully. Look at it in wonderment. Take common sense fear with you. It will keep you out of trouble. It will
Yeah.
guard you, but allow that wonderment to take you on the exploration of life. And one
Yeah.
of the things I love in nearly 13 years of doing these shows is how people have discovered their courage, their strength, their abilities, their meaningful purpose, the calling in life. And they've stepped into the very core of who they always should be, but they wouldn't have become that had they not gone through the experiences.
That's right. And I never, like 30 years ago, would have envisioned
Mm,
myself as a creative writer.
right.
Because I do have a very analytical brain, but I do have this curiosity as
Mhm.
well. And
Well,
so,
I mean, if you don't have curiosity, you can't be analytical because the analytical is based on curious.
yeah, that's
So,
true.
and so it's
Right.
where do you take that curiosity? And it's just instead of honing it in on one thing, it's taking away the blinkers and looking at or looking at as a
All
whole.
possibilities. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
juicy. I
So,
mean, that is like, ooh, where else? What else? And
yeah.
I think that's missing a great deal in life with so many people. They're so kind of caught up in the kind of the slavery of the day, and
Yeah.
and they're feeling like there is no hope for tomorrow because of today. Well, you create your hope for tomorrow with your attitude, with your, like if this is not serving you today, what can you do tomorrow differently? That can open
Right.
up different doors. And I know for me, when I was quote in my little recovery, going through a divorce, going through a few other things, uh, they're reading actually a lot of mythical type books. I needed to go somewhere that wasn't my reality.
Right.
And through that, I made the discovery of who I was, and it helped me kind of come back into life. And
Yes. I can
so,
see that.
so that's why I think, reading is very, very important when you feel stuck, when you feel fearful, when you feel anxious, because it removes you from the anxiousness. It takes you on a journey, but
And
underneath it all, it's igniting you, right?
yeah.
It's switching you back on and letting you look
Yeah.
at life differently.
And engaging in
Yeah.
different worlds
Hmm.
that,
Which
you know,
I mean, yeah, they are the kind of the bookworms that are always in the books and they don't live life. Read the book and let it inspire your life. That's really what we want the result to be. And
yeah.
just even if it's just a kind of, I see things differently. I didn't pay attention to that before, but now, oh, that is more intriguing. I never thought this
Yeah.
subject would appeal to me, but now I want to know more, right? And that's what a good book does.
That's right.
So,
So there's so much to learn out
yeah,
there.
exactly. And the thing is, I think we also think we so pigeon ourselves in categories like you were a researcher, right? And like stay in your lane. No, no, no. Sorry, this is a highway. It's got many lanes. I can cross it and go into another lane if I want
Hmm.
to, right? And as you said, it takes a certain amount of bravado of getting out of your own doubt. Well, I'm a researcher, so how can I be an author? When it makes you a good author because you are a researcher.
Right.
It's just a different skill that you need to learn, but as a researcher, you're constantly looking at different skills in order to get to what you need to know.
That's precisely right. And when I was going through, I had ovarian cancer.
Oh
It's
dear.
completely
You're
fine
okay
now.
now? Good, good.
Totally fine. 15 years ago.
Bravo. You're
But
gone. That's
at
it.
that point, I sort of thought, okay, I do want a new challenge. And what are some of my own characteristics and my own abilities that would enable me to dive into another career altogether? And I realized that I love doing research. I love a mystery. I love a puzzle. So, and I had written many articles. Of course, those are completely different than a fiction novel.
Mhm.
But I
But
thought I
the
can do
discipline is there.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the
And
thing. You may be writing articles, but there's a discipline and a process to it. So what you're doing
yes.
is fantasizing it and juicing it up a little bit more, adding the
Mhm.
sprinkles.
Yes, that's true.
I think it's, a
So,
lot of we sell ourselves short a great deal and everything. And, I love what I call people's redirect. Very often when people get something like you did, ovarian cancer, cosmos is saying nudge, nudge, wink, wink, cosmic 2x4. Are you paying attention? You are meant to change direction and you're not paying attention.
yes.
And,
Yes.
and I think that cosmic 2x4, in whichever way it comes, it's like it's a time to reflect,
Yeah.
right?
And I feel I feel almost just so grateful that
Hmm.
I had that opportunity
Hmm.
to, I mean, at the time, of course, it
No.
was a little bit devastating, but in retrospect, I mean, I have come to appreciate so much more. I mean, I always did appreciate life, but I've come to appreciate many of the smaller things in life and friendships
Hmm.
and the life that we have to live and never stop living.
And so much more that you could do, right? I
Yeah.
think, before the cancer, it would be, when no time to leave your career and write a book. You would have laughed at them, I'm sure. Right. And that,
Yeah.
but the cancer, as it said, it gave you a new view on life. It gave
Yes.
you a new platform on which to grow from. And it's like, well, hell, if I can get through cancer, I can certainly write a book.
Right. And that's why I like to refer to myself as a ovarian cancer thriver rather
Mm,
than a survivor,
yeah,
because I feel like I've really thrived as a result of it.
yeah.
Um,
But a little bit like, your main character kind of stuck in something, going through something, and through, the book, through reading this diary, that became her gateway to move forward. All right. And
yes.
and and it's always this, what is our gateway that's going to help us move forward? Because when you're stuck, you're stuck. And I used to call it Murphy's Law, that every time molasses, and how do you get back out of it? And half the time is that, stop wiggling, right, and kind of pay attention. You're like quicksand, don't move. You'll sink faster. um, and then kind of pay attention to what is around you and how is it there to serve you. And I think that, we need to go through those struggles, I think, to actually understand
Yes,
the gift we really are, and how we're meant to express it.
that's right.
So
So
many
those couple
chapters
of,
in your life.
yes, absolutely. This isn't the last one. So,
So how did the DNA come into it?
well, um, as I said, um, um, well, in this particular book, in Ivory Bones, the bones are retrieved along with the diary and sent to Brynja in Iceland, and she isolates DNA from the bones. And
Mhm.
because they have this DNA database that could sort of connect everybody, they're one big family there.
Right. Yeah.
She identifies an individual that lives out on some island and goes to talk to her and see if she knows anything about this individual that wrote the diary. And it turns out that that family that she visits have some of these pieces of the Lewis Chessmen. So there are a number of the pawns that are missing, and that's what he had. But I don't want to get too into chess here, but there are pawns, and then there are chess face pieces,
Hmm.
like the king and the queen and so forth. And those are the pieces that are still missing. So it turns out that this family had inherited these Lewis chessmen, and they were related to the captive that was taken as a slave. And so that family um, so the genetics comes into play in terms of linking the
Mm.
diarist to this family and therefore linking this family to the fate of the Lewis Chessmen.
Ah, it's funny how, I mean, I mean, when you sit back after reading a book and go, gosh, I wonder how they, how, what was their thinking to take it over there? Because there's sometimes you look at something, and if you just talk about DNA, this, that, etc., how do you put it all together? And then you
Yeah.
kind of read and it's like, wow, that was so, complicated. How, but they revealed something that made so
Yeah.
much sense. And it's like, did you ever get stuck in writing certain things because you found, gosh, how do I put these pieces together?
Yeah. And also, how do I explain it in a
Yeah,
way that is easily comprehensible?
yeah.
Like the way that she connects this family is through something called mitochondrial genetics, where you can trace a maternal cell line
Like
because it's only, yeah,
ancestry.com, yeah,
but
something
it's
like that.
only women
Ah,
that pass
right,
on the male mitochondria.
right.
So I had to sort of explain mitochondrial genetics,
Hmm.
which is, that could be a boring topic, but I found a pretty interesting way to explain it.
Yeah. Did you ever at one time kind of get yourself, kind of in the pit, like writer's block? I just don't, I'm stuck here. I don't know where to go. Or, was it kind of just an easy flow from one to the next?
It was a fairly easy flow. Um, because as I said, I had initially written an outline. Of course, one gets stuck in terms of just not feeling that
Mm,
juice that
yeah.
particular day to write. Um, but I don't really feel that I got stuck in terms of the plot.
Hmm.
You know, um, I had pretty much worked that out in my head. Um, so I wouldn't say that I got stuck. I did come up with some other ideas as I was writing in terms of like red herrings and so forth and how to develop the characters further, not only the main character but others. So I don't feel that I really got stuck. Of course, I had days where I just felt like
I don't feel like writing
it's
today.
not working
Yeah,
today.
exactly.
And so I didn't fight it.
Right.
Then I just don't write. And I know others would say, well, you just got to sit down and write anyway. Well, I have more aspects of my life that I
Yeah.
can enjoy in addition to writing. And so,
Which you then can, just kind of create, switch the juices back on and inspire you to get
yeah,
back to writing. So yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it's, sometimes removing yourself from something gives you the clarity you need to see.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I mentioned to you that my husband is now working in Laos
Hmm.
as a hospital director.
This is
And
his
so,
retirement, folks.
yeah, very, he said he's working harder than he's ever worked before. So he has a 2-year stint in Laos. And so I go there. I mean, I'm not going to live in Laos for 2 years, but I have been there a couple of times for 2 months each. And that really forces me out of my environment
Yes.
and enables me to just put my head into the writing because,
Hmm.
he's working in this hospital and, I do enjoy the culture, but I've got days and days with really no distraction, which
Yeah.
one has at home.
Right. And I think that's something kind of, a lot of people, when you're right, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And I think, you've got to know what works for you, right? That yes, you can take suggestions, this works for me, that works for me. Great, you can try them out. But when it comes down to it, what is it that works for you? And that discipline, that all of that, well, that's fine, but it comes in different ways for different people, and you've got to
That's
honor your
right.
own. Hmm.
There's no one way.
No,
There's no one way. And
right,
one has to discover what is your own way, really,
right.
what works for you.
Yeah, and I think knowing our own personality types helps a lot with that. I'm a last minuter, ADD, right? So it's like push comes to shove, and then I have to do it, and that's when the creativity comes on, and I do it.
Yes.
I'm not good at the. I could have done it 6 weeks ago,
Yeah,
it just doesn't. And I've learned not to fight that. It's like
right.
as much as I would love to have that kind of, functionality, I don't, and yet I
And
still
that's
manage to
you.
produce, and that's it. And I still manage to produce what I need to produce, when I need to produce it. But I would love to be different, but I'm not. And that's the way it is. And I think
And it
that's,
works for you.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think as a writer, people have got to know what works for them,
Hmm.
right? And you've got these, writing workshops. You can write a book in a weekend. Well, what kind of book?
Would we want to read that?
Yeah, exactly. And yes, you can get an outline done. You in a
Hmm.
weekend, you can write down that outline, or kind of where you want it to go and all of that. But I think you kind of, I think removing yourself from the creative process if you're forcing everything to come out in a weekend.
Yes. Yes.
How long
So,
does it take you to write a book?
so this, because I don't write daily,
Hmm.
I do travel a lot. I've got family, friends. I
Right.
I have a
Life, you've
fairly
got
full
life.
life is happening too. So honestly, the first book took a good 4 years
Hmm.
because I had never written a fiction book before.
Hmm.
And I had to do all the research. And as I mentioned, I did not outline that book. So I would do one draft and then go, uh-oh,
Hmm.
I got to go back to the beginning and change this. And took a lot of time going back and forth with
Right.
that one. But this second book took about a year and a half,
Hmm.
on and off.
Yeah.
Um, I am really proud of this book because I think I've really got it down now with the character arcs and the mystery and the plot, and it's pretty exciting. And there is a lot of history intertwined within it.
When you read something or watch something on TV and it goes very intricate and very kind of detailed, and you go, oh gosh, what kind of mind wrote that? And it's like it boggles your mind watching it or reading it. And so
Yeah.
it's like those kind of details when it's working out the puzzle or working out, everything else. Do those pieces come easy to you? Like, it could be so easy to get yourself into like, what have I done? I'm confusing myself. How am I, you know,
No, I think they came pretty easily to me. Um,
because you are that researcher and you know how to
I
look for,
think
yeah,
so.
yeah.
I think so.
Mm,
But then, one always, when hopefully, one always has additional ideas as one is writing. And, I really wanted to make sure that I had sprinkled through the book some of those indications of who the sort of evil person
mm,
could have
right.
been. So there are a bunch of red herrings, and I really wanted to make sure that at the end the reader would go, ah,
Yeah.
now that
Yeah.
now that makes sense. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not going to say anything more, obviously, but
But that's what we want. We don't want it to be a I saw it all the time. We don't,
right,
but there's always that, obvious one must be them, but then it turns out to be someone else, and then you realize, of
right,
course,
yeah,
they were always in the shadows and we didn't pay
that's the
attention
thing.
to them.
Got to keep them guessing.
Yeah. What are your influences? Is it other authors? Is it TV shows? Is it movies? What's kind of your influence?
I think I've always enjoyed reading historical fiction because I do love reading a story,
Yeah.
but I like learning something in the process as well. I've always been enamored as well with the Nordic culture.
Hmm.
Don't ask me why. Maybe I've got some DNA in there. I don't know.
Maybe that'd be interesting
But
to find out.
it's like I think so I've read many of books by like Henning Mankell and Stieg Larsson, and I just love that world.
Hmm.
um I do enjoy series, certainly not cozy mysteries,
Hmm.
but like even real crime documentaries,
Hmm.
or missing like Harlan Coben's series.
Hmm.
He's a terrific writer, but even his books get translated into series in a pretty
Right.
convincing way. So I'd say series, although this has nothing to do with the podcast, but my husband cannot sit through a series because he's got like ADHD, and he's like, how many episodes is this? Am I going to be able to sit through all this? How many seasons is
Yeah.
it? So,
I am guilty of binge watching. You know,
yeah.
and I try and make myself, okay, 2, 3 episodes, that's it. You're going to watch something else and then come back to it. But it's so easy. I
Yeah.
could just keep going from one to one to one easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do get that. But I mean, I also love really good writing. I mean, the 2010, I think it was, the Sherlock Holmes new series, I thought was
Mhm.
so well. Moriarty, I thought was so delicious as an evil character. And it kind of, you want the evil character to be someone you almost root for. right?
Yeah.
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 And it's like, no, they can't win, but they're just so engaged in them because they're so delicious. Um, and I love things that kind of keep me there. There's some stuff I just watch just to stop my mind from chattering, right? And
Yeah.
I'll forget it afterwards. But then there's other ones where it's really got me
Yeah.
intrigued, and that's really what we want because it has such a good effect on us, whether we're reading it or watching it. It has such a good effect on us and keeping us engaged and taking us
Hmm.
down through so many emotions, and that participation as a reader or an audience, I think is something that is really healthy for us.
I absolutely agree. I mean, there's only so much time that one can spend in one's own head.
Yes,
I mean, I find anyway,
yes, yes, yes.
I've got to either be out there exploring, traveling,
Hmm.
meeting new people, or in this case, writing, because that really gets me out of my own head also.
Right.
Not that
And
I don't enjoy being in my head, but
yeah,
there's
I mean, like
the day is long.
exactly, yes, exactly. And like all that traveling and being out with other people, it's like, oh, that waitress is kind of rather quirky. It should be cool in the book, right? And
Yeah.
that's the thing, you gather characters and circumstances and everything else, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that would fit in here and that would fit in there. If you just kind of shut yourself and just wrote and you didn't have any of that, you know,
Yeah. That's
it's
why I
the
think it's so important, especially, if one is writing about a culture or an adventure or mystery in another country, that one has to really understand that culture rather
yes,
than, and the only way for me anyway to understand it is to go there and to
yeah,
spend some time there and talk to people, make some friends.
right. It's the
Yeah.
flavor of the people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you may have the facts and the data, but it's the
Yeah.
flavor, and that's kind of what you want. You can have a character that on paper looks like this, that, etc., but it's that engagement in that character that you want to come off the page, right?
Right.
So,
That's right.
and that's when we've got good movies and good scripts and things like this. It's those characters that we get invested with, and the
It's really
storyline
all
they go.
about
It
character,
is.
right?
It is.
Really.
We either relate or we wish we were. They've taken us on an adventure we know we never could go on, but
Yeah.
it's that vicariously living through, which makes it all exciting. So,
Yes.
I always say that a book is a gift that keeps on giving. And so, that whenever you're giving gifts to people, instead of something frivolous, they're going to throw away, give a book or
Hmm.
give a book certificate if you don't know what kind of books they want. But if you've
Hmm.
enjoyed a particular book, buy it one for your friends as well and say, look, I really enjoyed this. I'd love you to read it and let's have a chat about it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think
So
that,
much better, really, than
yeah,
bringing a bottle of wine or some flowers,
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, which is gone,
Which
so
is also
quickly.
which is also appreciated, but yeah,
Yeah, but if
it
there's something
doesn't.
about a book that you refer to even later, I remember reading that in a book once, and that kind of is relatable to what's going on right now, and that's the keep on giving, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So books make wonderful gifts to people, and you maybe have somebody that's not feeling well or feeling a little isolated, or even at the present moment, just because of the stage that we're in at the present moment, um, feeling anxious about what's tomorrow holding. And this
Yeah.
escapism of reading a really good book that's factional, that with the fact and the fiction, it's an escapism, but at the same time, it's subliminally giving them tools on how to get through their day.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, it's great therapy as well.
Yeah.
So good to have. How do people find the book? Where did they find it? And how did they find you? How did they reach out and connect?
Well, I do have a website. That's probably the easiest. Shall I spell my name again?
Please do,
Here, I'll
because
hold
people are
up the
listening.
book. I'll hold up. I don't know if they're just listening or watching too, but
They'll be
it's
listening and watching.
okay. So it's at the bottom here too. And it's Sara, just like you,
Mhm.
Winokur.com. So that's my website. There's tons of information on there. I'm also on Facebook. I have a personal page, an author page, Instagram page. The book can be found at um, obviously Amazon. um, and I could send you the link to that, but they could
I
also
have that
just look
link
up
on the
the
show
name of,
page.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's it's also available at Barnes and Noble and many independent bookshops. You may have to ask for it through bookshop.org, but it's available at any bookstore. It may not be on the shelf. It may be on the shelf, but if it's not, you just ask for it and they'll order it for you.
And that's a good way of supporting your local bookshops.
Yes.
We're seeing them kind of die off, or big conglomerates coming and
Yes.
taking over. And there's something wonderful about going to a bookshop and just kind of cruising the books. I've always said a book
Yeah.
jumps out at me and says, "You've got to read me." And so
Yeah.
taking the time to go into a bookshop, feeling a book, looking at the title, reading a couple of pages. Oh, yeah, this is the book for me. And you don't
Yeah.
get that just from ordering online. So I
Right.
think, that link again is a book.
Yeah, it's called bookshop.org.
Right. So
And
bookshop.org. Yeah.
one can go onto that website and order directly from that website. But another wonderful thing that this organization does is support
Yeah.
independent bookstores,
Yeah. So
which I
support
think,
your local. I mean, we're
yeah,
just with everything going on right now, we're promoting local and a
yeah,
great deal. So
right.
there's a bookstore somewhere in town. So order it to go there and
Yeah,
give them a chance
exactly.
to keep
I
the
mean,
roof
they
over their
may
head.
exactly. They may or may not have it on their shelf, but they
Yeah.
can easily order it and get it
Yes.
to you.
Exactly. So I think that's a good thing to do, and an awful lot of people too. I don't know if you're doing this, if you're doing the author circuit of going around and doing speaking gigs and things like that. Will that be on your site where you're going to be?
I will be up at the Nordic Museum up in Seattle. I'll be at the LA Times Book Fest. Um, Primarily right at the moment since the book just came out yesterday.
Mm,
Uh, it's a lot of radio interviews and
right.
podcasts right at the moment. I'm also I'm working on the Audible version of this too, because I know that many people prefer to read by listening, which
Yes.
is, fine. Especially, maybe you go for a long walk and you might be bored otherwise, unless you
Or,
were listening. Yeah, that's my
commuting.
case.
Yes.
Commuting,
I
yeah.
mean,
So
yeah, yeah.
I'm making an audible version of this
It
too.
also makes housework go through faster.
Yeah,
You just do the
exactly.
housework going, oh God, vacuum, and because you're listening to
Yeah,
something, right? So
yeah.
yeah,
Getting out of your world.
yeah, and getting out of your world, which I think
Clear
is really
ahead.
important. So,
Right.
um, you know, thank you for redirecting your life, and taking down this road because we all benefit from it. And love you back for the next book as well. And then be intrigued to see where you go, after that one, where your world takes you and takes us
Yeah.
and the next adventures because um yeah, as I said, my brother's an author and he generally does a trilogy and then okay, time for a new character in a new area, and he might just do a one-off, or it might end up being, oh no, there's more to tell from this person. And it's let the
Right.
characters speak to you, right? They'll tell you what they
Yeah.
want.
We'll see where we go
Yeah.
after the third one. I've got some ideas.
Great. And of
Yeah.
course, obviously make a good series, right? And
Yeah.
I think that the fact that Iceland, which is so talked about at the present moment, kind of going through Iceland and the adventure of that, and the historical and with the chess pieces and with everything else, I think it would make a great series because it will educate and show people a different world,
Yeah.
especially Americans, which often think that America is only America and that
Is
there's
the
nobody
world.
else in the world. So
Yeah.
it's a good idea to show them somewhere else
Yeah.
and really take them around the world through the books and
Right.
through the
And
series. So
that is one thing I tried to do too, is to almost make the scene, like the setting, a separate character,
yeah,
that it has so much influence on how people behave or react.
yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, I love traveling. Don't do much of it anymore, but when I used to, it was immersing into the culture and always looking for the common denominator. And we all have a common
Yes, so
denominator.
much. Yes.
But then it's just different rituals, different practices, different way of living, which
Yeah.
is just like it's a different dish on the table.
Yeah.
Partake.
Yes,
Not everything has to be
absolutely.
meat and potatoes. Partake on the different flavors of
Right.
life, right? And broaden your horizon. And I think we all benefit from that.
Absolutely. That's the joy of it.
So thank you so much again for writing this and coming and sharing today. A reminder, folks, www.Sarawinokur.com, and Barnes and Nobles and Amazon, and go to your local bookstore and order it. Get the book, read the book, start a book club, or gift the book to someone that really is kind of needing that break from where they're at right now, and let them go on a different road. And don't forget, do the two books at the same time. Yes, you can read this individually, but it's so much nicer to go back to the origins of the characters, so book 1 and book 2, and then it will make book 3 even more exciting. So thank you so much, Sarah, and to everyone else out there, have a good day. Take care.
Thank
Bye
you,
for now.
Sarah.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tab at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.